everyone, welcome once again to the Pop Culture Yearbook. I'm Captain Logan.
And I am TheRealManos.
Manos and I have jumped into our time machine. We have gone way back in time. We went back a few years too far, so we had to come back forward a little bit. And Manos, where did we finally end up?
Well, we've taken the Wayback Machine to 1995.
Yeah, 1995. I remember it well.
Yes, I remember it just like it was yesterday, practically.
Well, at least you were like an adult with your own car and living in your own house or apartment or something.
I was, and I was having a chat with a coworker yesterday, and he had told me he was born in July 1990, and wow. I graduated in June 1990, so he's been alive I have been out of high school the entire time he's been alive. And I told him, like, wow, you and I are, like, talking like you're a real person and everything. And, oh, wow, this is strange. It's weird. I still think of 95 as, like, 10 years ago. It's weird how time goes.
Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, sometimes I kind of do, too, even though I was a kid back then, just because I liked that period in my life quite a bit. I don't know. I mean, like, not just in my life, but I mean, like, I liked entertainment a lot at that point. In fact, that was I didn't even write this down, so I'm glad I'm mentioning it now. That was the year that, like, Pinky and the Brain started, and things like that. Like,
yeah.
That was the pop culture, like, renaissance for me. At least, in my lifetime, I guess is what I mean. Because obviously it's not the pop culture renaissance, but, all right, so here are some things that happened in 1995. That was the year of the Oklahoma City bombing. That was the year of the big Ebola virus that killed 244 Africans in Central Africa. That was the year that O.J. Simpson was found innocent. That was when JavaScript was first introduced. The DVD was finally announced. The Grateful Dead broke up, and Toy Story became the first completely computer-generated movie. And how different animation is now because of it. Popular movies besides Toy Story included Batman Forever, Apollo 13, GoldenEye, Braveheart, and Die Hard with a Vengeance. Popular musicians included Smashing Pumpkins, Rage Against the Machine, Garth Brooks, and Alanis Morissette. And in comics, that was the beginning of the Age of Apocalypse. Manos, what did you choose to talk about from 1995?
Well, I've been talking a lot about movies in the last few episodes or TV shows. So I decided to go back to music. I haven't done a CD in a while. And
cool.
What I did was I dug through Wikipedia's listing for albums that was released that year. And looking back, I realized, wow, I was buying a lot of CDs because there was a lot of stuff I owned that was on this list for this year. And there was a lot of stuff, actually. I liked a lot of quite a few things that came out that year, like the Alanis Morissette CD you mentioned, and Matthew Sweet had a really good album that year. But I had to go with my gut, and I picked Bjork, the album Post, which is her...
I don't know if I even know that.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you've heard some of the music from this album, actually, because this is a pretty popular album of hers. It is her second solo CD, and... I kind of considered Bjork's first three CDs almost a trilogy, actually. And maybe I'm not the only person who's spouted that off. But she was the lead singer of the Sugar Cubes in the 80s, part of the 80s alternative scene, which is one of my favorite periods in music, is kind of the late 80s alternative music scene, which there was so much great stuff coming out of there. And her band was one of them, the Sugar Cubes, out of Iceland, and they had a couple of big hits like a Motor Crash, which is a song about a car crash, and I think the song is called Weirdo, which I always enjoyed that song. But she had launched her solo career with the album appropriately called Debut, and that was a fairly big hit for her, and that's where I think Venus as a Boy is on that album. That was pretty, and Human Behavior. And the second album was called Post, which is the one I'm talking about here. And then the third one is called Homogenic. Now, I always kind of considered this a trilogy for a couple of reasons. Partly because she was making the break from being the lead singer in a band where, you've heard this before, like people, when they're in a band, they have to make all sorts of creative decisions as a group and stuff like that. But now she's kind of out on her own. And if you listen to these 3 albums, you kind of like, you can see the progress of her, career as a solo artist and who she was. Because the first album, debut, almost sounds sort of like a Sugar Cubes album. And Post, part of the reason why I want to talk about this is kind of the transition album for her. This is where she kind of started to figure out who she was, and Homogenic is, the conclusion to that really when, she kind of had everything in gear for, the kind of creator she wanted to be. And I like Post quite a bit, actually. It's one of my favorite albums. If I had a list, it would be on it. And this album includes the tracks Army of Me, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard, Isabel, I Miss You, possibly Maybe, and let's see, Hyper Ballad, which is also a good one. And let's see, Army of Me, frankly, was the lead track, and it actually recently kind of got rediscovered again because it was one of the lead tracks on the Sucker Punch soundtrack, actually. They did a kind of remix of it a little bit. It's when Baby Doll was fighting those giant robot samurai warrior guys. That was the song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the song in that sequence. And it's very well used. It wasn't the first time. It was also used in Tank Girl as well. It was actually released at the same time. So that was on 2 CDs at the time. And I really like, one of the things I like about Bjork's albums is she really does love all aspects of music. She really is kind of an artist in that way, where she really tries to figure out, like, how to go about, songs, in all sorts of vocal ranges. Like she can do high pitched stuff, like, that they really love on, American Idol and stuff like that. She can do that stuff. And then she can go right, in the next lyric to something really guttural and animal-like. And she kind of plays around with her voice a lot like that. And I think in this album, that's where she also started to kind of play with the music as well. I remember at the time, what was it, Isabel? That's a beautiful song, by the way. And at the time, I was hanging out with some friends, and what was I, 24? And I was hanging out with some friends who were much older than I was, like in their 40s and stuff like that, which is weird because now I'm that person in their 40s hanging out with, 20-year-olds. But I had this on, and one of my friends kind of listened to it, and she was a little bewildered by it. And she said, "This almost sounds like 2 songs being played at the same time." And I thought about that, and I was like, that it does. There's a lot of really there's this electronic stuff going on with really kind of like string stuff, and she really does kind of play around. I think some people call it electro pop or something like that. And she really did kind of like I think kind of nail it with this album really. And I also find her videos to be really some of my favorite videos by any artist really. And this album has like a couple, like the song "I Miss You" is directed by John Cristofalusi, who did Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a crazy little video. It's a John Cristofalusi cartoon. You look at it for 2 seconds, you know what it is. And actually they had to play a censored version on MTV because John Cristofalusi is John Cristofalusi when he doesn't have the censors or anything like that. But and also actually I think he even snuck in a couple of his own standard characters in that one. I don't remember if you remember the character George Liquor from Ren and Stimpy. Well, he had to change the name to George American because Nickelodeon wouldn't let him name the character Liquor in Ren and Stimpy, so he had to change it to George American. But he even pops up in that video, which is kind of weird. I guess she thought, well, whatever you want to do. And I just enjoy this album a lot. I think that's all I have. It's definitely the album out of that year that kind of like kind of struck me the most. Also, It's So Quiet is a fantastic little bit. It's almost like a show tune kind of thing, where actually it's a really good example of what she does in a song. I mean, it's very playful and light, and then for the chorus, it just explodes in this weird, crazy show tune thing that's really loud and screamy, and it goes right back to the base of the song, and then gets quiet again. And I think Spike Jonze directed that video. So that's Bjork's Post. I really dig this album. If you've heard of Bjork and you haven't really checked out any of her stuff, I think the first 3 albums of hers especially are really good. Also, I mentioned the trilogy. Another thing that kind of puts me in that mind set is her first 3 albums kind of has almost the same pose on each cover. Debut has her front and center facing the viewer, and she kind of has her hands in front of her face, and she looks rather shy. And the second one, Post, the cover kind of turns explosively colorful, and she looks more kind of confident. And then the third one is really animated looking and just insane, where she doesn't even resemble like a person anymore. She has this kind of strange makeup get-up thing going on. So it does almost seem to visually on the covers track that. So there you go. That's my shtick from 1995.
Awesome. I like it when you do music, because then I go look at bands I've heard of and find out they have other good music that was never a single.
Yeah. It's funny. I always had this thing that every time it seems like almost everybody's biggest song is my least favorite song from them.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. It's like every time, I like Aerosmith, but I hate Dude Looks Like a Lady. I like the Bangles, but I hate Walk Like an Egyptian. I hate that song, but it's like their biggest song. Oh, and
it's all poppy and catchy, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess it always seems to do that. But I don't know. I've never considered myself a huge music guy, but I love it. So that's it.
Well, Manos, today I cannot believe the thing I'm going to talk about. I can't even believe I picked this. How sometimes you'll pick something that you don't love, but you'll feel like, it's kind of important for some reason, so I'm going to talk about it anyway.
What could we be talking about?
Well, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start off before I even tell you what it is by saying this. In 1994, the year before this, there was a science fiction film that came out that nobody expected much from, didn't cost a whole ton to make, actually did decently at the box office, had a record opening weekend for the month of October, and then went on to span years and years and years of television. That film was Stargate.
Oh, okay.
Well, this film wanted to be that, but didn't even kind of come close to that, and ended up being known as one of the worst bombs in movie history, and was also at the time the most expensive film ever made.
Oh,
and that is Waterworld.
Okay. Let me just get comfortable.
And I felt the need to do this because it's really interesting what happened with this. First of all, I can't at all whatsoever understand why anybody thought this would be a success. I mean, like a lot of the people who worked on it thought it would be known later on as a big sci-fi classic, and I have no idea why, because it's kind of boring, and the characters are unmemorable and not especially likable, and for not the worst concept in the world, it doesn't do anything. I don't get it. I also can't figure out why it cost as much to make as it did, because yeah, it's got big, giant, lavish sets, but $175 million, really? So, especially when your villain is played by Dennis Hopper, who can't be that expensive because he was in the Mario film. So anyway, so I'm sure everybody knows something rather about Waterworld. Waterworld was this, as I said, giantly expensive science fiction movie that didn't even kind of recoup its cost at the box office. It did finally become, it did finally make its money back in video, but that usually happens.
I think that happened last year.
Yeah, it took 15 years, but fine. No, but anyway. So of course, the film is Kevin Costner as the main not especially likable character, and Dennis Hopper as the main not especially interesting villain, the Deacon. And what I find interesting about this, and the reason I picked it, because originally I wasn't going to do this, and then I started looking at the top grossing films from that year, and this movie is listed at number 9 on that list.
Wow.
Of top grossing films in 1995. So if it was in the top 10, why is it considered such a giant bomb? Because you can be in the top 10 and not recoup your costs back if your movie costs $175 million and nobody went to see it. Obviously people went, but basically everybody and his dog has to go if you're going to recoup that kind of money back. And so, especially back then. What you ended up with was a $20 million opening weekend, which would not be bad for a normal film back then and isn't terrible for a lot of movies now even. And, it only did I think 70 or 80 million in here's the figure, 88 million domestically total. Ugh. And then it did better than that overseas, but like you said, it took forever for them to recoup it in video, and it was just a disaster. So let me explain that. I'm talking about this because it's a fascinating disaster. As I was looking into this, I got more and more intrigued. First of all, there were, and I don't hate Dennis Hopper. I think Dennis Hopper's great. But it's interesting that they offered that part to a lot of to a lot of bigger actors, and nobody wanted it. Gene Hackman was offered it, Lawrence Fishburne, Gary Oldman, nobody wanted it. And so ultimately they went with Dennis Hopper, who I heard once, by the way, say in an interview, somebody asked him if he was sick of playing villains constantly, and he said, well, no, it's great because they always die, and then I get to come back and play another one. And if only real life worked that way. And I thought that was a great answer. But anyway, one of the things I found extremely interesting about this is that the final rewrites were done by Joss Whedon, who called it 7 Weeks of Hell. The plot centers around this guy, the Mariner, in a futuristic world where the entire world is covered by water because the polar ice caps melted, and he is this mutated guy who has gills and webbed feet, and anytime anybody finds out about that, they try to kill him because, of course, naturally, if it's a future where everyone's regressed and there's not a lot of technology, of course, everyone's going to try to kill everything they don't understand, naturally. And so that's kind of what happens. There's no explanation, of course, as to where this guy came from or why he seems to be the only one of his kind and nobody's ever seen anything like him. There's nothing like that. They kind of hint that somehow or rather he's the first of his kind, and it doesn't seem like really enough time has passed that you would already start having these giant leaps in evolution. But we also don't know exactly how much time has passed, so maybe, I don't know, enough that nobody knows exactly how this happened, and it's been long enough even that it doesn't occur to anyone that, hey, maybe all the cities are under us. Which was a really strange plot point to me. That it doesn't occur to anybody that maybe there was a civilization buried underneath the water. I don't know. It seems kind of obvious to me, but whatever. So anyway, basically what happens is he goes to this city, which of course is built on top of the water, and finds this girl who has a map tattooed on her back that's supposed to be a map to dry land, and again, as far as I can tell, there's no explanation as to where that map came from or why she has it on her back, or maybe I missed it because I was bored, and it's kind of easy to miss things when you're really bored watching a movie. And so I don't know. I was objective as I could be, but man, really, this movie is mostly people are firing at each other. There's a lot of giant action scenes, which are, really well made, but just, I don't care about any of the characters, so I couldn't get excited about it. And so, I don't know, if any of those things were explained, I totally missed it, and I really don't think they were. So, like, so the bad guy, the deacon, who runs this big gang of smokers, they all smoke, so they're called the smokers. Yeah, I know. So he runs this gang, and he wants the map so he can find dry land just like everybody else. And all of his people, by the way, have better technology than everybody else, because they've salvaged a lot of things. And so like they have like jet skis with motors on them and things like that. And they have cigarettes and things. And actually, I gotta say, I'm dogging on this movie. There are some bits that I thought were pretty clever. One of them was the smokers have a giant stockpile of what looks like Spam, but they didn't want to, I guess, pay for the rights to write Spam on it. Yeah. So it's called Smeat. Which I thought was kind of amusing. I don't know, that made me laugh. And the ship that they're on is the Exxon Valdez tanker. Okay. Which I thought was kind of amusing, and obviously, there's an obvious message there, but obviously there's kind of an ecocentric message going on there, and I thought it was kind of amusing that the guy who famously I had his name. Oh yeah, Joe Hazelwood, the guy who famously got apparently drunk and accidentally caused one of the most giant oil spills in history. His picture is up in the cabin of the bad guy, and he's like the patron saint of the smokers. And so that was kind of clever. I thought that was amusing. But anyway, and it's not until it sinks that you finally realize that they're actually on the Exxon Valdez.
Here's a quick historic fun fact, by the way.
Yes, go ahead.
They I don't remember what, but they renamed the Valdez.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, because of bad publicity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like, well, we're not going to keep the name on the ship. We're going to change the name of the ship.
Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it was apparently one guy's incompetence that caused it.
Yeah, he had his third, what do you call it? not the second in command, but the third in command.
Yeah.
Who would, I think he barely ever been on a ship.
Oh, man. Really? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is a fun fact. I didn't know that.
Fun fact or conversation killer.
So anyway, it's one of those plots that's all about an artifact, which happens to be a tattoo on the back of a girl, and everybody's after it, and ultimately, spoiler alert, but ultimately by the end, they actually do find dry land, and then the mariner decides, I have webbed feet and gills, and I like being on the water, so this place isn't for me, and he leaves. The end. That's kind of the movie, honestly. I mean, more things happen than that, but it's just he's entirely unlikable. He spends half the movie wanting to throw the women that he brought on his ship off the ship, and at one point he actually picks up the little girl and just tosses her overboard. And ultimately the other woman that's with them has to go get her, and I don't know, it's just like, I guess we're supposed to sympathize for him later because he finally decides he likes the little girl and he tries to save her and yada yada yada, but ultimately I can't get inside this guy's head. He makes no sense to me, and honestly, I don't think Kevin Costner was really right for the role either. As bizarre of a role as it was, but I always think that, by the way, about Kevin Costner in big action roles, because I think Field of Dreams killed me with Kevin Costner, because he fits a lot better to me as like the cornbread farmer. I don't know. I didn't like him as Robin Hood either. Like, I have a tough time with that.
He's a terrible Robin Hood.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Well, the thing is, I can accept him in action roles, but it has to be that kind of same character, like Untouchables, for instance. That kind of American character. He can't play like mutants and English people.
Or mutant English people?
Yeah, especially those.
Apparently, during the shoot, Costner and the director, Kevin Reynolds, got in like giant fights, and there's even rumors that like by the end of the movie, Costner just fired him and filmed the rest of it himself. Nobody knows if that actually happened or not, but what I find really interesting is that they had done a lot of movies together before that, and that was the last thing they did. And then just this year, they actually got back together, and they're doing that History Channel miniseries, The Hatfield and McCoys. That's actually them back together again.
Oh, well, that's good.
Which I think is really kind of interesting. And honestly, I saw a commercial for that the other day and thought it looked kind of interesting. So I don't know. I honestly hope that's good. And honestly, I like miniseries, and I wish that more of them were made. So I think that's kind of neat. Jack Black has a little part in it as one of the pilots for the Smokers. I think that's kind of funny. One other interesting thing of note is that they had a whole lot, because they were trying to pump this up as this giantly huge, this is going to be the new big sci-fi classic kind of thing. They had big theme park attractions at Universal Studios, and they had them at 3 of them in Hollywood and Japan and Singapore, and they're still there. They still have them, and people still go, because even though it was based on this not so great movie that really bombed at the box office, apparently those attractions are awesome, and they've won awards, and people really like them, and I think that's really interesting. But anyway, I don't know. So yeah, it's not a good movie, and it costs way too much to make, and Kevin Costner completely regrets ever being involved in it, and it's I don't know. It's a sad chapter for Kevin Costner, who's an actor that I generally like, even though I don't care for some of the roles he's chosen. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to bring up for anybody who happens to not know it or who never saw it. I gotta be honest with you, I never watched it. I finally sat in and watched it this weekend just for this, and just because I'd never done it, and I'd always heard how terrible it was, and I finally went, you know what? Me being the sci-fi fan I am, I probably should subject myself to this finally, and I did. And I don't know, it wasn't impossible to sit through, but no, it's not good. It's not good.
So, the Postman next?
I don't know. I've never seen that either.
He made that afterwards, and I remember people were calling it when it came out, Dirt World.
That's really funny. Oh, speaking of dirt, that was another question I had. This guy has gills, and he can go all the way. He can go far enough down where he can get dirt, and dirt's like a commodity where you can trade a lot of things for dirt in this universe. And he'll and so like at the beginning, I know it's silly, but one thing I thought was weird was he just brings like this town like a little bit of dirt. I'm like, why don't you bring like a whole ton of dirt? You could easily, I don't know, maybe it's because they'd all be like, where'd you find it? There's no dry land, and then you'd have to like explain it or something. I don't know, but anyway, that's all I have to say about that, Manos.
Oh man, I'm glad I've never seen this film.
Oh, you've actually never seen it?
I have never seen it. I've avoided it.
It's funny, you sounded like you were having convulsions just listening to me talk about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, because I know how bad. I've heard people talk about this film over and over again. It's like, I don't know. Unless I'm with a group of friends and they ironically want to watch it, I probably will not.
Yeah.
But
it was worth mentioning because sometimes really bad movies are almost as important as really good ones.
They are. They're actually. I do think bad films are almost as educational as good films, frankly.
Well, yeah, because it tells you what not to do.
Yes.
So anyway, well, hey, Manos, let's get out of Waterworld and come back to the present. And finally, God, this was an expensive trip. And Manos, where are we going to go next time?
Well, next time we're going to take the Wayback Machine not too far back. We're going to 2001.
Yeah, 2001. Cool. I just got out of 2001 because I just finished reviewing the entire first season of Smallville. So now I got to go back to 2001.
Oh yeah, that's right. It started then, didn't it?
Yeah.
Guess what I'm not talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm not either because I do Crypto Freaks. You can hear me talk about that a lot. So anyway, well, hey, Manos, thanks a lot for jumping in the time machine with me again. Next time we're gonna do 2001. I'll try to pick something maybe I like next time.
That'd be great. I would love to hear it.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us back in time on the Pop Culture Yearbook. We'll see you again, hopefully in just a couple weeks. Well, actually, it may be longer than that. Come to think of it, I gotta mention just because I'm gonna be on hiatus in July. But we'll be back with you at least in August. And thanks a lot for listening. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm the Real Manos.
We'll see you next time.